while I was grieving for Sam, I could be also enjoying life. And I was also blessed with the insight that to feel guilty for moving on so soon was not the way to feel. And all of it put together with additional insights with which I was blessed caused me to write the book 2 years after Sam's passing, my book, To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief.
Mm.
And so I did that. And I really want to get the message out to the world because I think that people are under a particular set of assumptions because of cultural conditioning that when someone passes, we need to grieve in a certain way.
Welcome to the Menopause Mindset Podcast, the place to get some answers and feel supported along this often bumpy journey. Many people sail through menopause, but many people don't. And so my guests and I are here to motivate you and inspire you so that you can make menopause a happier transition for yourself and for your loved ones. I'm Sally Garozzo, an award-winning clinical hypnotherapist, a menopause educator, and I can't wait to share my passion about wellness and how we navigate these changes and transitions. So come on then, let's dive in. So my guest today is Vicki Paris Goodman. Vicki is an author, a retired mechanical engineer. She sings and plays violin semi-professionally and is a theatre critic for a local newspaper. Now, you might be wondering why she's a guest on today's podcast about menopause. Well, that's because she has a very unique and interesting perspective about grief and loss, which I know many of us experience when we're going through the menopause, whether that's grief because of something that's going on in our lives remaining unfulfilled within us, or grief of losing a loved one that can happen at this midlife time. Either way, grief and loss comes up a lot at midlife. And when you hear Vicki's story, hopefully you will find it very soothing. So Vicki, welcome to the podcast today. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Sally. I was looking forward to it.
Oh, bless you. So it's very early where you are. It's 7:30 in the morning where you are. So we're very, very grateful for you getting up early.
Yes, you listened to my complaint. Thank you. I'm over it now.
Brilliant. I've got the other end of the day complaint. I'm like, it's 3:30. I'm having my afternoon slump. And actually, for the first time in forever, I just ate half a double decker, which is like, a really yucky, horrible chocolate bar. I never eat chocolate like that. I'm like, oh my God, I really need a boost. Anyway, that's totally by the by. We're just having a moment before we kick off. So, Vicki, I would love for you to share your story about the passing of your husband and how it led you to experiencing this very unique optimism that came afterwards. So, yeah, would you like to talk to us about that?
Of course, yes. Well, my husband passed from cancer, my husband Sam, in 2019. We had had 2 years from his diagnosis till his passing. And, even though the doctors had said that there was no chance whatsoever for him to survive this, we thought we'd get a miracle because he did so well for a year and a half on treatment. So, you just kind of go there as a human being. But he did pass in July of 2019. And on the very day it happened, his passing, I was flooded with optimism. It was unseemly because it was within a few hours of his death, and I thought, what's going on here? This is not right. And my initial instinct was to push it away. But I thought, I've been so strong during this 2-year ordeal. And I took such good care of him, and I'm not the caregiver type, but I rose to the occasion for Sam. He was the love of my life. And I thought, if good things want to come my way, even on the day he passed, maybe I should let them. It felt like a helping hand was coming down from somewhere outside myself, and I was raised in a very secular family. So this wasn't really my mindset. But for some reason, I just was motivated to open myself to whatever wanted to come my way. And it was the best decision I could have made. First of all, not only was I raised secular, but I'm not a particularly optimistic person. I'm not pessimistic. I'm kind of middle of the road. But I was flooded with optimism. And it really did feel like something or someone was immediately trying to help me or lead me forward
Mm.
into what I now know was the next chapter of life, which has been mostly great. I was also not just flooded with optimism, but there were opportunities coming my way suddenly to do things that maybe I couldn't have done if Sam had lived. And I embraced them. I did all kinds of wonderful things. I traveled to exotic places. I went to Antarctica. Sam wouldn't have wanted to go there. He wasn't a cold weather vacation kind of guy, and I auditioned for a play and I got the part, just all kinds of things. I rejoined the orchestra that I'd been playing in until we got Sam's diagnosis, at which point I stopped playing with them
Yeah.
temporarily. And I rejoined immediately. And all of these things in retrospect, now that I look back on it all, were such a blessing because while I was grieving for Sam, I could be also enjoying life. And I was also blessed with the insight that to feel guilty for moving on so soon was not the way to feel. And all of it put together with additional insights with which I was blessed caused me to write the book 2 years after Sam's passing, my book, To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief.
Mm.
And so I did that. And I really want to get the message out to the world because I think that people are under a particular set of assumptions because of cultural conditioning that when someone passes, we need to grieve in a certain way. And maybe that way isn't right for us. Maybe there's another way.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So many things have come up for me as you were talking and telling us that introduction. You said at the beginning you weren't really the caregiving type. That piqued my curiosity.
Oh,
Why? I guess because I'm a therapist. So why would you call yourself not the caregiving type? And what did that look like for you and your, especially in terms of your relationship with Sam?
well, what it really is is that I think because of the way I was raised, there was a little dysfunction there that we don't need to go into. But I think because of that, I was I tended to kind of be in survival mode most of my life, and which made me a little bit self-involved, let's say. And so I was just always trying to prove myself to myself, which kind of precluded my looking outward toward doing things for others. When
Mm.
Sam and I first got married, and we were married almost 22 years at the time he passed. When we first got married early on, I said to him, I said, "Sweetie, um, what if one of us should get sick and the other one would take care of the sick one? I know you would take excellent care of me, But have you ever wondered what would happen if you were the one who got sick and needed caring? And Sam was a very funny man. He said, "The thought has crossed my mind."
That's
and,
hilarious.
and I said, "That's okay." I said, "I'm not the least bit surprised. It's why I'm asking the question. And I want to make a promise to you right now. I am prepared to make a promise that if you should ever get sick, I will take excellent care of you." And he said, "Thank you, sweetie. That does ease my mind." And
Oh,
I knew that I would keep that promise if I needed to. What I didn't tell Sam was that I wasn't sure I could do it without resenting him. So
ah,
imagine how relieved and happy I was when he, at the end of his life, when he needed caring for, and I was taking care of him. I had him at home on hospice, and I didn't resent it one bit.
did you grow from it? How did you find that experience of caring for him? Like, did it really open up something within you?
What it did was it made me stop beating myself up. Kind of, I realized that I'd been beating myself up over the assumption I would resent taking care of anyone, even Sam.
Yeah,
And when I did that when I was able to do it without resenting it or him, it was such a relief for me because I thought, okay, I'm not as I'm not as faulty a person as I thought I was,
yeah.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, of course, because when you have a lot of trauma, you have that trauma history, and as a result, you create these adaptive coping mechanisms, which might look like being in fight flight mode, then we can be cut off from those sensitivities because we've had to be in survival mode. And then when something comes along, like you say, when you're having to care for, and this has crossed my mind totally. My husband is way more caring than I am. I mean, I'm very caring. I'm very caring in my job, and I absolutely, when I'm with a client, I am so there. I'm feeling everything. But outside of that, um, sometimes I struggle. It's not that I struggle, it's like I'm quite protective over my energy. And that has actually crossed my mind with my husband. We have these conversations all the time where I'm like, who's going to die first? Like, please let me die first. Because I'm not sure how I would be if I had to take care of you on your deathbed. But I think it's a conversation worth having because it brings up, like, it highlights actually what death can do for us in terms of like really bringing us back home to ourselves and what matters and what's important, and that real humanistic element that we all have within us, that compassion that often lays dormant underneath the surface of trauma. And in those tender moments they have an opportunity to really flourish and come to the surface. And we get to live out that, as sad as it is. And death, I've not been through, my nan died and my granddad died. When my nan died about 10, how many years ago? I think it's about 15 years ago now. It was hard, and it was the first death I'd experienced, and it was very raw. So I haven't experienced that real, when someone really close to you dies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I think I can learn a lot from it, and I think our listeners can as well, even if you haven't been through the death of a loved one. So what else do I want to ask you? Why Antarctica? What is in Antarctica?
Oh, okay. I think I'm making an assumption here. I don't really know, but I think when someone loses someone they're very close to, there's sort of a, like you said, kind of a flight mode you go into. You just want to kind of escape your life and do something adventurous. At least that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to pack a suitcase and just get in my car and drive somewhere. But I realized that I was thinking, I live in Arizona. I was thinking, okay, I'll go to Winslow or something and stay overnight. But then I was thinking, okay, I'll be in some shabby motel and then I'll have dinner alone in some diner, and I thought, no, let's put this off. Let's do something productive, like plan Sam's celebration of life, and then think about the adventure later. And what happened was I got an email from a travel website that I get weekly emails from, and they had an Antarctic expedition cruise advertised. And I thought, oh, that's the adventure. So I had Sam's celebration of life. And in the meantime, I had booked this wonderful trip, but Sam passed in July of 2019. So the trip was going to be it wasn't until 2020 sometime that I would be going. And by that time, COVID was upon us and it got canceled. It took until 2022. I didn't go on this trip until October of 2022, which was
Right.
over 2 years after Sam passed. But it's okay because I had it to look forward to. And, I knew I'd go eventually, and I did. And it was nothing more than it just sounded so adventurous. And that's what I needed
Yeah.
after losing Sam. But I don't really think Sam is lost. I know this is part of my transformation,
Yeah.
Sally. I was raised secular. I didn't believe in much of anything. None of my family did. And even though I'd begun to believe years before in a higher power, because it just didn't make sense to me that there was nothing, that all of this was created by nothing. So I believed, but not very strongly. It remained a very rudimentary belief system that I just hadn't given much thought to or developed. Well, after Sam passed, suddenly all of these things came together. Um, Let me just tell you one little story that
Yeah.
kind of explains it all. One of this very serendipitous things that happened is I was meeting about once a month with the hospice chaplain. Meetings with her were offered to me, and I said yes. And I had access to her once a month for a full year after Sam passed. And the first thing I asked her was, tell me about the afterlife. I want to know if Sam is there, and if so, where he is. And she recommended the story that I read the story of a neurosurgeon who had been secular and had rejected the near death experiences of all of his patients and the ones who had had near death experiences. And I read his story about the coma he was in from a brain infection that he had no way of even acquiring this infection. He didn't have a wound of the kind that you need to even get such a massive brain infection of this kind. And he was in the coma for 7 days, and he had a near death experience, and his colleagues were taking care of him in the hospital, and they couldn't get the infection under control. And, he was going to die. And if he did live, this infection will have destroyed his brain and he will be in a vegetative state for the rest of his life. Well, he survived to resume his career, write the book, go on speaking tours, no brain damage whatsoever. His whole experience was so divinely inspired that it alone brought me the rest of the way to fully believing in God and an afterlife.
I see.
And yeah, and so that's how that happened. And it was just part of my belief system changing so radically. And therefore, I was even more open to the insights that came my way that allowed me to write the book and develop the audio episodes from the insights that came to me after I wrote the book. Because they kept coming even after I wrote To Sam with Love. So, yeah, that was a big part of the story.
Yeah, that's kind of, it sounds like that was the catalyst for
Yes.
you thinking differently about where Sam had gone. And I think that's really important, actually, in terms of death. And also, I mean, we all have varying different belief systems, but obviously, from you, it's quite clear that your optimism has come from this belief in the afterlife that you have gathered from somebody who's had a near-death experience. And I don't know, have you read Anita Moorjani's book, Dying to Be Me?
No.
That's another similar account of Anita Moorjani, an Indian lady who had, I'm not quite sure, I think she lived in America and she ended up with cancer and she tried absolutely everything, all the kind of Ayurvedic stuff, every wellness thing under the sun, massages, therapy, sound healing, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And she ended up in a coma and had like the most blissed out experience in this coma where she was able to see all experiences happening at once. So she could see her brother flying into the hospital. She could see the people round the bed. She could see her past. She could see her future. And she was like in a very, very vivid dreamlike state, I think she would describe it. And then when she came back from that, she went into spontaneous remission and now goes around traveling. And doctors, you know, it's like it always amazes me that these things happen and yet they're not studied. I mean, they are studied, but it's very kind of underground and it's not mainstream. But I think these things really need to be brought out in the mainstream because obviously something is happening that we can all learn from and that we can all perhaps take some piece from, especially if we've had a lot of grief in our own life and use that to maybe transform that grief or get out of that grief quicker if we're in prolonged states of grief that are affecting our health, which is what I'm particularly interested in, you know, having a happy, healthy life. And if we're in these prolonged states, whether that's grief or depression or anxiety, then it's not particularly great for our health. And I do think there are perspectives that can help free us from these darker states. And that's what I'm really interested in. So you came upon this information about the afterlife, and what happened as a result of that? How did you change on the inside as a result of that information?
Well, one of the things is I'm no longer afraid of dying. One of the insights I received after I wrote the book was it occurred to me, is death really tragic? I came to the conclusion, no, it's not. Now, you do
Mm,
kind of have to have that belief system where you believe in a higher power and an afterlife. But most people I'm finding do have that
yeah.
belief system. And, you know, one of the assumptions I think we make is that there's this ideal life where you meet someone in your 20s or 30s, marry them, and you stay married to that person. They're the love of your life and you have a good marriage and you both live until you're in your 80s or 90s. And then you pass within a relatively short period from one another. And if your life doesn't fit that description, then it's somehow your life has been lesser, you
Mm,
know, that you didn't get that ideal. And we take that upon ourselves, you know, as a failing. I say that God has a plan for each one of us. And yeah, we still have free will, but I think there's a general plan, and that for some of us, that plan includes finding one person to live out your entire adult life with, happily. For others, God has a more compartmentalized or segmented plan
mm,
wherein we live our life in sort of chapters, two or maybe even more. And some of those chapters, or maybe even all of them, might be lived with different people. And that doesn't have to be less than that ideal. In other words, It's all ideal because it's all there to teach us different things. So, when the love of my life passed away, I was presented with a next chapter of life. And I know Sam is there, he visits me. That's another story. And yeah, and I have a wonderful new life now that doesn't include him living here physically with me. But is it less than what I had before with Sam? I don't think so. I'm pretty happy with the things I'm accomplishing, the things I'm experiencing, the things I'm learning, the people in my life. It doesn't have to be his death, which I feel uncomfortable calling it death because his soul lives on. But his death was just the end of one chapter in the beginning of another. And
Yeah, I
that's
see.
the way God has taught me to see it.
Yeah. When you say God, are you how do you believe God manifests? Like, what is God to you?
To me, and this is based on the neurosurgeon's near death experience and some others that I've read since then, God is the all knowing, extremely loving entity that created the universe and created us. And when we do pass, we lose our body and our brain, but our soul goes to this place where it is surrounded by a love so powerful we can't even imagine it here on earth. And we're at one with God. According to the neurosurgeon, when we're there, we know everything because God knows everything. We know everything about math and physics and chemistry and history and philosophy. And, so the neurosurgeon comes back and his brain is now limiting him again. So he doesn't know all those things, but he remembers having known everything. So
Mm,
it makes sense to me. Anyway, that's kind of yeah,
an offshoot.
I don't know, a little kernel of what I believe about God and the afterlife.
It's very, very interesting when you ask people about their belief systems. And I suppose what strikes me is it's quite a radical change for you. So you were, sorry, a mechanical engineer, which strikes me as being very scientific, very rooted in, physics and all of that, the sciencey stuff. And now we're in this different paradigm, this totally different way of operating. I don't even know what my question is really, but when you look back, I suppose, when you look back on your life as a mechanical engineer without those beliefs, do you see it as less than? Do you see it as like more one dimensional than your life now?
In a way, for one thing, we're burdened when we don't have a belief system like the one I've described. We're burdened by a fear of death.
Right.
And we think if we have a loved one pass, that they are just gone. And to that extent, I think it is less than. What being a very analytical, scientific type does when you're raised secular as well is it kind of makes it very difficult for you to believe in anything else because you think you need proof, absolute proof, in order to believe. And that's why this story of the neurosurgeon was so powerful for me because the way he tells his story was so convincing to me. It was so convincing that it brought me the rest of the way to believing in these things. It, it was proof for me, or at least close enough that I could take myself the rest of the way to believing. So yeah, when you're a mechanical engineer, you don't believe these things on faith very easily, especially if you're not raised to.
Yeah, and then I suppose if you go through life and then you experience tragedy, how are you going to reconcile with that tragedy if you don't have some kind of faith or some kind of belief system that pulls you out, even if it's like, so I had Eileen Cusick on this podcast, and she's very much into sound healing and very much into the nature of the universe from a physics point of view, from like an electric perspective. And to me, that really resonated with me, that whole, I mean, I haven't quite got my head around all of it yet, but it made a lot of sense to me about, you know, energy and stuff that we can feel in between our hands when we do this. It's like, oh yeah, I get what that is now. That's like plasma, you know, very, very diffuse matter in between, you know, that we can feel and our energy field. And I get that. And that's really helped me reconcile some, you know, anxiety that I've experienced, or, you know, I know that if I go in the sea, that will really help to clear my energy, and I'll come out and I'll feel a lot better. When it comes to those tragic experiences that we have, I know for me, digging deep into that faith and that sense of there must be something else has really helped me to feel just more balanced, calmer, more optimistic, as you say, more like, you know what, there is a future. There is something that I can move towards. This has happened for a reason. Well, it's not particularly a death, but for example, I haven't had children, and that's been a grief that I've had to go through. And so, you know, it's that idea of, well, you know what, I'm going into a new chapter of my life without children. So it is that moment in time where you realize that's not going to happen for you. And yes, there's a grief surrounding that, but also it's an invitation to move into something else should you want to. So I suppose my next question would be, how did you manage to hold on to those two emotions of grief and optimism at the same time?
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by my Menopause Wellbeing Practitioner Diploma course. This online self-paced course is for you if you're in the wellbeing industry and you want to become a certified menopause wellbeing practitioner with this globally accredited and insurable diploma. Menopause is no longer a silent taboo, as women are demanding more and more ways to get support during their transition. If you'd like to be part of their success story and earn money whilst doing so, this course is for you. The course covers what is a menopause coach, the hormone changes during menopause, what is estrogen dominance, why does stress matter so much in menopause, how are our organs affected by menopause, histamine intolerance, the 4 levels of healing through menopause, how we support our clients, how menopause impacts the wider world, and the business of menopause, including 2 case studies. In this course, you get 3.5 hours of on-demand video, written articles for every module, 11 modules, lifetime access, mobile access to tons of extra resources, badges for your website, a lovely certificate that you can hang proud, one-to-one support from me via WhatsApp or email, and your final assessment is done via an online quiz that you can retake as many times as you need to. So what are you waiting for? Become a menopause wellbeing practitioner today for just £127. Just visit sallygarozzo.com/meno to enroll. This episode is brought to you by my transformational trauma-informed coaching. TTIC offers you the opportunity to work with me over a longer term basis to help you develop a more regulated nervous system, stop the cycle of burnout, and create a soul aligned value system that puts you front and center of your life. Let me help you release physical, mental, and emotional symptoms of dysregulation so that you can have more energy and resilience to play with life. Let me help you dissolve outdated coping strategies like avoidance, criticizing, controlling, or people-pleasing so that you can have healthier relationships and apply more coherent coping strategies to triggers that occur in everyday life. Let me help you have a more beautiful, aligned relationship with yourself so that you can get your needs met and achieve your goals, whatever they may be. How do we do this together? We get change by applying beautiful, artful conversation and skillful questioning techniques to help you have those all-important light bulb moments. We get change by applying somatic practices and space-holding techniques to help you develop a safe relationship with your body so that you can start to process stuck trauma. We get change by using visualization and superconscious processes to help you bring your healthy future self forward and imprint your new reality into your existence today. The result is powerful. You are more resourceful, you are operating in alignment with what your inner being wants, you are making decisions from a place of coherence and empowerment rather than dissonance. You become more sensitive to your needs, while at the same time becoming more resilient. You stop performing and start behaving authentically. All parts of your psyche are unified and you feel whole again, able to operate and function socially with a safe feeling in your belly. To learn more about having transformational trauma-informed coaching, just go to sallygarosso.com/transformational-coaching.
Great question. I'm glad you asked it because I might have forgotten to mention this. One of my recommendations for people who lose someone is to strike a balance between what I call activity and quiet time. You know, the activity being doing anything, having lunch with a friend, you know, going to an orchestra rehearsal in my case, you know, going to karaoke and singing my heart out, you know, whatever it is, going traveling somewhere, whatever. Just, you know, those are fun things. Strike a balance between that and the quiet time needed to process what's happened to your life. Even if you believe, as I do strongly, that it's really not a death, that the soul lives on, you still need to process what's happened to your life because that person isn't sharing your home with you physically anymore. You know, things have changed. And, you know, a lot of people, some people did tell me, and I know they tell others who are suffering a loss, keep yourself as busy as possible so you don't have time to think or feel. I instinctively knew that was bad advice, well-intended advice, but bad advice. You know, you're going to have to deal with what's happened to your life eventually. Why put it off? You can be having a wonderful time moving at your own pace into this next chapter. You need not delay that, but you need to process what's happened. So, you know, sit and think or take a walk or take a hike or, you know, watch a movie, just, you know, but be by yourself a certain amount of the time so that you can process what's happened. And I found that to be the best possible way to move forward. Now, there's a warning along with this. So I'd go out and I'd do something fun and I'd come home and I would feel empty inside. Because Sam wasn't here to share things with me anymore. You know, I used to come back if I did something with a friend instead of with him, I'd come home and tell him about it, you know, and that wasn't available anymore. So I would feel empty and I thought, okay, this is the way it's going to be. I can still have fun, but it's not going to mean much of anything for a while, maybe for a long time. I don't know. But I knew that there was no choice, that I was on the right path, and there was just going to be that one thing missing, until I found a way or was ready to make a change for that. And, a year and 7 months after Sam passed, I woke up one morning and decided, you know what? I think I'd like to meet someone new. So the online dating thing is a horrid process, but I did meet somebody really nice, and we've been together over 3 years now. But the point being that most people aren't ready for that right away. And I certainly wasn't. And
No.
so it was okay. And I accepted the fact that my life just wouldn't have a lot of meaning for a while.
So what was that optimism that you experienced right at the beginning? How is that different to what am I trying to say? How is that different to the grief that you experienced? So you experienced his optimism. Like, what was that like? Was it like, because in my mind I'm thinking the relief, there's a sense of relief that this person's not in pain anymore and I now have all of this freedom. But was it that, or was it something greater, like a tenderness that came through in that moment when he passed?
Boy, you're asking me to look back 5 years, but
Okay.
I do recall it pretty well. There was a relief because this was harder on me than I knew until later.
Mm,
Looking back on it, I thought, my gosh, I was experiencing anxiety. It was making me kind of sick in the stomach, and I would have headaches and things a lot of
yeah.
days, and but I didn't even realize because I was so focused. But yeah, this was having a big impact on me toward the end,
Mm,
Sam's illness. And so there was a relief when he passed. But the reason that there was something else having to do with this optimism was that helping hand that I described that I didn't even realize was God. I thought, oh, is Sam trying to lead me forward from the afterlife, or is it God who I haven't even believed in very strongly all my life? I now believe that it was a helping hand
mm.
coming from God.
What did that
That
look like? What was the helping hand? Like, how did it manifest in your
it
life?
was a feeling that was so
Uh,
strong, nothing like I'd ever felt before.
yeah.
I had been so grounded in my secularism from my family that I'd never had, at least I wasn't aware of ever having had an experience that something outside myself that I couldn't really explain was pushing me in a particular direction.
Yeah.
That was a brand new thing for me. And I paid attention because I thought, wow, I don't think I've ever experienced anything like this, not that I've been aware of. And as I said before, I felt a need to go along with it rather than push it away. So that's the best I can do to describe it.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, what insights did you have as a result of this whole experience with Sam passing, this optimism, this helping hand, and this sense of being very connected to God, and this God being a force kind of outside of yourself coming into you? What were some of the insights that you had?
Right. Well, other than the insight that came later, that death isn't tragic. It's part of life. It's part of God's plan.
Yeah.
Other than those, something that the neurosurgeon said had me sort of extrapolating other things that he didn't say. He says that there's this all-encompassing love in the afterlife that is like nothing we can imagine or really understand here on earth. And from that, I sort of extrapolated that souls are perfected in the afterlife. They don't experience negative emotions like anger or jealousy. They want only what's best for us. And this is a very helpful message for people who suffer a loss, because there's so much guilt involved in moving on, or moving on what people think is too quickly,
Yeah.
and I say, no, that, that's kind of a cultural conditioning that awfulizes death and makes us feel guilty if we feel like we should move on before a certain amount of time has passed. And I say, no, no. Are the souls that pass, of the people who we loved, want only for us to be as happy and fulfilled as possible. They don't want us wasting time. We can grieve while we're moving on.
Oh, I like
So
that. Wow. Okay,
yes.
that's a real light bulb moment. We can grieve while we're moving on. Okay.
Well, that's part of the balance I was trying to describe between activity and alone time. We can move on and do fun things, and start looking at what the next chapter of life will look like, while we are grieving this huge, enormous change in our life. Other people would characterize it as grieving the loss, but I'm still trying to figure out what's really lost,
Okay.
because the soul lives on. And so we can look for little signs, and, I get them all the time, of Sam being there. So I'm still grappling with what's really been lost, because
Right.
this, when you remember that it's part of a plan, so I was one of those people that didn't have the ideal of being married to one person, and then we both die in our 80s or 90s. So I'm one of the ones for whom, God had a plan to have a more segmented life. And I think, okay, that's because God thinks I can accomplish things, learn more things, experience more things, and maybe even teach others.
Oh, like you're doing right now.
Yes. And it's all positive because, if I can adequately describe this message to others, then they can have the benefit of these insights that with which I was blessed. I think God has chosen me to be the messenger. Why, I don't know. Maybe because I speak fairly well. I write quite well. I had a secular upbringing, which maybe makes all of this more convincing. I don't know, but I don't think any of this came from me. It all came from God, and I am simply the messenger.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I like that. I like that there are, and what I like these days actually is that I think because the world is so open now because of social media, whereas in the past you would get the prophet, like, and I hope this isn't blasphemy, but you'd get all these prophets around the world that would create these religions. Yeah. And now you have people who are in a way becoming like prophets, but not on that grander scale. They are sharing their own unique experiences of what God feels like running through themselves. And because of the social media and how all connected we are, we have the ability to share that story to a worldwide audience and share what is happening to us. So, in the sense, like we are all these kind of like mini prophets sharing our own unique perspective in the hope that it will teach others how to perhaps, I don't know, live a more optimistic life, or, sail through life a little bit more frictionless, or just experience life with more joy rather than having to be in a prolonged state of negative emotion.
Yeah, I think so. This is another assumption I think we make, that people who have slightly different belief systems are somehow wrong. But I think maybe it's also God's plan for us each to experience Him in our own way, so that there's really no right or wrong about it,
Mm.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can express that in the way that you want to, according to your own faith or what you're drawn to, what kind of religion you're drawn. Are you Christian, by the way?
No, my family was Jewish, and but not religious.
Mm.
You could Jewish. Someone pointed this out to me. It had never occurred to me. Jewish is the only religion where you don't have to believe in the religion to be Jewish. It's you know,
Yeah.
it's it's a it's a heritage or a tradition as well. If you're born to a Jewish mother, you're Jewish,
Mm.
and so and taking on a belief in God and the afterlife so late in life. So far, I haven't been comfortable in with the idea for myself of organized religion. So I am just going along with these insights and inspiration that God is giving me, and kind of making it up on my own with His help.
Yeah.
And that's probably, I would guess, the way it's going to be for me.
So you
Unless I
haven't
have some other.
adopted a religion?
No,
No. Okay. Yeah. So
no.
you've adopted a spirituality, should we say?
Yeah, or a belief system of my own, but not a organized religion.
Yeah. Okay. That's
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
So you said something about awfulizing death, that the culture awfulizes death. Why do you think it does that? And it is interesting because I think you're right. I do think we're programmed to believe that like death is the thing that we ultimately need to avoid at all costs. So everything that we're sold, all this, especially in the wellness industry, is like avoid, 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 stay strong, stay healthy, stay upbeat, which is incredibly important, of course. But to have to thrive while we're alive, to be healthy. But I do wonder if we're avoiding the inevitable, and if we over try, like this whole thing of being on our A game all the time can sometimes feel exhausting. And actually, by just sort of letting go and surrendering to the inevitable, maybe there's something in that. Maybe we'd actually live longer if we just surrendered to the inevitable and ate what we wanted and, I don't know, had fun. Um,
Oh gosh, there's so much there, Sally. Wow.
yeah,
Um,
that's my brain for you.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, I don't know why our culture teaches us to awfulize death. It just seems to be a thing of Western culture. I don't know why, and I don't think it's particularly helpful, because it does make us fear death. It does produce anxiety in our lives. Another thing is we don't talk about death in our culture much, and uh, I now believe it would be helpful, maybe not essential, but very helpful if we didn't avoid the subject so much. Maybe more people could get some perspective on what's really going on, and even understand some of the message I'm trying to get out there themselves without hearing it from me, if we talked about death. I discovered something. Apparently, all over the world, there's this organization called Death Cafe, and there are chapters everywhere. I hadn't heard of it until about a year ago. And I actually went to one of their meetings in my little community here. And mostly it was older people who showed up at the meeting, but there were a couple of younger people, like I'd say 30-ish. And I had to say, boy, I commend you two for being here, because most people, but especially young people, do not want to think about or talk about death. And I think it's a very healthy thing at age 30 or whatever you two are, to be interested at this point in life in talking and thinking about death.
What do you think it gives us when we acknowledge death from a younger age?
Well, if you talk to others about it, I think it gives you a variety of perspectives. And one or more of them might resonate with you. And so if you can understand some of these things that it's taken me my whole life to understand, and losing Sam to understand, if you can accomplish that at a younger age, I think it's very helpful to living a more peaceful existence throughout your adulthood.
Yeah, I agree. And also understanding, like when you're talking about death and listening to people's experiences, especially positive ones like yours, like now after speaking to you, I'm no longer as scared now of my husband dying first. So it's like, you know what? I really like this because I've heard your take on it, that now I know that it's possible for one to feel optimistic and okay, it's just a new chapter. Then if that's possible for Vicky, why is that not possible for Sally? You know, it is possible, I think. And so I think when we hear these stories, and of course not every story is going to be like yours, other people's stories will be different, but when we listen and get an idea of what's possible, it helps us to perhaps map that over into our own life.
Yes, that's what I'm hoping, trying to do. I'm retired. I could be doing all these fun things like playing in the orchestra and singing and writing more, more, doing all the things I love, instead of, and I am doing all those things, but I'm also spending a lot of time trying to put my message out there to help others, which feels so
Mm.
good because, as I said before, I'm not the helpful type. So finally, I have my niche. God has blessed me with a way to help others.
Yeah.
And so, and yes, I think it's not only possible, but I think if we can just shift our beliefs about death and God's plan and really life itself, we can all have what I have found: the
Mm.
optimism, the realization that death isn't tragic, that somebody in a married couple is going to pass ahead of the other one, and it doesn't have to be tragic. It's just the plan. It's the
Mm.
plan, and it only means that you have more to learn and experience and maybe teach others, before you go to join your husband in the afterlife.
Wow. Wow. That's a really nice place to finish, actually. And I think my biggest takeaway from this conversation is the idea that spirituality can be a real resource for us when times are hard, when we're going through something difficult, when we're, especially when we're experiencing a kind of loss, because the the flip side of that, the reframe is that, well, what have I actually lost? As you said earlier, like where is the loss? Yes, there has been a loss. We have to acknowledge that. But where have I also gained? And also, if Sam has transformed into the afterlife, then he's only lost the physical body. And he's, I believe that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. So we are energy. And when we pass, this energy transforms into another energy, because that's the law of physics, right? So,
Mhm.
I mean, that's that is my belief system. I do have a spiritual belief system. So yeah, like bringing all of that into those tough moments. And I think that's what those tough moments really call for. They call for an analysis of our belief system. There's a deep invitation during those moments to dig deep and figure out what it is that we believe, talk to people, read, research. Or, as you say, sometimes it just happens. Like you just got this download. God came through you and you felt it and you listened to that call because you were tapped into your intuition. And you listened, you got the message.
Yeah, someone asked me if after I described some of the all of, what I've described here, if the shock of losing Sam wasn't really what happened to me that just produced such a radical transformation. I guess it's possible, although I didn't feel shocked at all. You can't always know.
Mm.
But I still can't dismiss the fact that for the first time in my life, I felt something outside of myself guiding me. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a very strong feeling at the time, and it was flooding me with the optimism as well. I don't know.
Well, it's your lived experience. It's your
Yeah,
lived experience. And I think we can't discount that. I think if it is what you experienced, then it's something that you're building on and people are benefiting from your message, then
yeah.
it's true for you and it might be true for lots of other people as well.
I think it can be. I don't see
Yeah.
why it wouldn't be true for others. It just requires a little shift in perspective, a little bit of undoing of that cultural conditioning.
Yeah. That says it all has to be heavy and awful and bad and final and yeah. And actually, what happens is when we do kind of lighten up and realize that it's not the end of the world or when we believe in an afterlife, I think perhaps it makes us less materialistic in this life because we're
Maybe.
yeah, like less, I don't know, less, we place less importance on materialism and more importance on, being in nature or connecting psychically or connecting with our hearts. And you can't commodify that, can you? So maybe that's why culture
No.
doesn't really want us to know that death isn't the final thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really earth-shattering realization.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, thank you so much, Vicky, for spending this hour with me and the listeners who are listening to this. You have a website. What's the name of your website?
I would have people go to, I would have you go to inspiredgrief.com. And there you can subscribe to my audio episodes that are free. They're about 12 to 15 minutes each. And a lot of this that you've heard today is described in more detail.
Mhm.
And I would highly encourage anyone, whether you've lost someone recently or not, to get the benefit of of the insights in those audio episodes at inspiredgrief.com. You just have to put in your first name and email address. And also there's you can buy To Sam with Love. There's a link there to, I've discounted it on my site. So you can get To Sam with Love and a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief there as well. And there's also a link to my blog, which is actually on my author website, but you can get to it from inspiredgrief.com by just clicking the button. And there's some articles. There are some articles there that are interesting.
Oh,
So,
brilliant. That's good. And you're
yeah.
writing another book, are you?
Actually, I finished it last week. I have some friends reading it now.
Wow.
Yes, it's called Speed Bumps and Other Impediments to Life in the Fast Lane. And it's about the trials of life from the point of view of a type A personality. And it's pretty self-deprecating. I had a lot of fun making fun of myself and my
Mm.
type A tendencies. The impatience, the drive, all of that. So,
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Well, it sounds like a very useful book, especially for someone like a type A personality or someone that's been through a lot of grief. Obviously, you have some beautiful words to share, you have some stories to tell, and you have some really incredible insights as well that I think will uplift and inspire others. So thank you so much, Vicki. I'll put all of your links in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing this moment with us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sally. It was wonderful.
There you go. That's lovely. Well done. What a nice conversation. Thank you,
Yeah.
Vicki. So I'd love to know what your biggest takeaways were. Be sure to leave a comment below and subscribe, like and share. Just so you know, not all podcasts are uploaded here. So if you want the full array of episodes, head on over to Spotify or Apple and search The Menopause Mindset. You also might like to come and find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn or TikTok. Just search at Sally Garozzo Mind Mentor. All right, folks, thank you so much for your support and attention. It means the world. Have a great week and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.